Well, it is looking more and more like the anti-war America First President Donald Trump is in fact going to take America into another war in the Middle East. He's been spewing the typical weapons of mass destruction lines, insisting Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. He's turned on his own supporters saying, I mean, look at this. Someone please explain to Kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. He also ignored intel from his own director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi testified not long ago that intel showed Iran was not building a nuke. And when Trump was asked about it, he said he didn't care what she said. He thinks they are.
Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having it.
Yeah, okay. It doesn't matter what the director of national intelligence said. I think, right? What's the point of even putting her in there? Also, according to military.com, a U.S. military official has confirmed that the U.S. has moved additional ships and tanker aircraft into the Middle East and hurried a carrier into the region. Meanwhile, the goalpost also seems to be shifting because what was at first Iran can't have a nuclear weapon has seemingly moved to they can't have ballistic missiles and let's take out the Ayatollah in a regime change. And that, of course, is coming from Israel. That's their new narrative. So where is this war headed? And what would be the outcome for everyone involved? Joining us now is Trita Parsi. He is a top expert on U.S.-Iran relations. He's the executive VP of the Quincy Institute and the author of several books on the U.S.-Iran-Israel triangle, including Losing an Enemy, Obama, Iran, and the Triumph of Diplomacy, as well as Treacherous Alliance, the secret dealings of Israel, Iran, and the United States. Trita, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wow. We seem to be marching into war. This is unbelievable to me, but I guess it shouldn't be a shock considering the history of the country. What do you think the end goal of this is? I just don't understand what they think is going to happen with another regime change, which seems like what they're aiming for.
Well, I think, again, there's a difference between what Trump's end goal may be and what the Israelis want. Trump may think that he will stop at destroying the nuclear program, presuming that that's possible, and that the Iranians don't respond. But I don't think that will be enough for the Israelis in any way, shape, or form. This was never about the nuclear program to begin with for the Israelis. If the United States steps in and takes out the nuclear program or does whatever it can to the Fordo facility, which is not the entire nuclear program, but let's say that the U.S. does this, do we think that the Israelis will be like, okay, well, this is great, let's just go back to our daily lives again? No. Then they will make an argument, which actually will be a compelling one, which is these missiles Iran have are extremely problematic for us. See the tremendous damage they have inflicted on Israel in the last couple of days. So we have to take those out. And then it will just snowball into more and more demands until they have done to Iran what they did to Syria. Remember how the Israelis just bombed everything in Syria after Assad fell. They wanted to make sure that regardless of who comes to power, Syria will never be able to challenge Israel's emerging hegemony in the region for decades to come. And Iran is a much greater potential challenger of that than Syria ever was. So I think the Israelis are not going to stop if the U.S. enters the war, because if the U.S. doesn't enter the war, I don't think the Israelis can continue to do what they're doing right now for that much longer. Iran may not be able to sustain the blows that it's taking for much longer. But bottom line is there's a limit to how long the Israelis can do this. But that changes dramatically if the U.S. enters the war. And this is part of the reason why within 48 hours after they started this war, in which they essentially asked Trump for some sort of a yellow or green light, and it was supposed to be Israel doing it, within 24 hours they came back and said, actually, America, can you do it for us?
I mean, we all saw this coming. Okay, what do you think Trump's actual goal is? Because Israel has announced, they keep bragging about a lot of things on social media. One of the things that they've recently bragged about is that they have put Iran's nuclear program back several years. That should be enough. What more do they want? That should be enough for the United States. If Trump's goal is not allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon, Israel's saying, we've already set it back quite a ways. Why isn't that enough? Okay, then, no more war. The job's been done. Great. Let's move on.
I don't think they have, though. I think that is the key issue. They may have said that, but I don't think they have. We don't have independent verification of exactly how much it's been set back. And bottom line is, yes, Natanz is where they had a lot of the centrifuges. Natanz is not well protected. No one expected Natanz to be able to survive an attack. But Natanz and Fordo are very different things. But beyond, there's one thing to destroy the centrifuge. Is a completely different thing to destroy the stockpiles of low enriched uranium. Those, to the best of my knowledge, have not been destroyed because there's no report from the IAEA about any radiation or anything of that kind coming out, which presumably would be the case if you destroyed it. And I don't even know exactly how you would destroy it with a bomb. So bottom line is the actual leverage the Iranians have is the low enriched and 60% enriched uranium that they have. That has not been destroyed. So the extent to which they have been really set back is unclear at this point. Mm-hmm. Again, if the Israelis were so successful, they could have stopped. And they certainly should not have come and asked the U.S. to step in. I think that in and of itself is an indication of two things. The Israeli goal, all from the outset, was to drag the U.S. into it. And frankly, they don't have to drag that much because Trump seems to be quite eager at this point. Mm-hmm. And secondly, had they been successful, there was no need to go back to the U.S.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things that they have mentioned a lot is that Iran seems to want to make a deal. Iran wants a ceasefire, or Iran wants to come to the table because Iran has been pummeled so hard. It's been so difficult on them. The Israelis are winning.
They're making both cases. On the one hand, they're having these headlines about how Iran is desperate for a deal. And on the other hand, Trump being so frustrated that the Iranians are not coming to the table. Got to make up your mind.
Right. Well, and not only that.
Narrative.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but I mean, for them to be saying, well, Iran is losing because look at them, they want to come to the table. But you're making a great point. Yeah, well, if you were winning, then you wouldn't need the United States. And yet you came begging to the U.S. pretty much immediately. So you're also in trouble. I mean, you know you're in trouble. Yeah. They might be in trouble. Everybody's in trouble. Maybe we should just stop this. And again, right. Trump also says...
This is the thing.
Go ahead.
The narrative in the mainstream media is very simplistic. Yes, absolutely, Iran is taking massive hits. Without a doubt, it's been profoundly embarrassing how unprepared they were for this. Very embarrassing to them how weak their air defense systems have been. That's not negating the fact that at the same time, through their missiles, they have wreaked havoc in Israel and revealed tremendous vulnerabilities in Israel's air defense system and society. And a prolonged war of this kind would be highly problematic for both sides, despite Israel's military and technological superiority. But the mainstream narrative is, there's got to be one winner, one loser. That's usually not the way things actually work.
Yeah. Do you think that, Trump has come out saying we have now complete and total control over the skies over Iran? Iran had good sky trackers and other defensive equipment and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived, and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old USA. I mean, do you think that's true? Where is Iran militarily?
I think to a large extent that is true. The Iranian air defense systems have not been sufficient. Of course, that is not the key thing the U.S. should be worrying about. It's not that the Iranians would shoot down B-2s or anything of that kind. I mean, that risk, I'm assuming, was there as well, but it's not the main risk. The main risk is that the Iranians have an even larger arsenal of medium and short-range missiles, which are the ones that they would be using against American bases. The ones that they've been using against Israel are long-range missiles. They have not depleted that, but they've used a lot of them. But they haven't touched the shorter and medium-range ones. And that stockpile is larger. And it's about how the U.S. defends itself against some of those missiles. That's where the problems will come from the United States. It's not, American airplanes being shut down over Iranian airspace. It's American military in various bases, 17, 19 of them in the Middle East, that are all within Iran's range. That's where the cost will be inflicted. In addition to Iraqi militias attacking, traffic in the Persian Gulf, oil prices going up, all of those different things that will make this very costly for Trump. The U.S. will not lose the war in the sense that it's lost militarily. It didn't lose the war in Iraq. It nevertheless was a strategic, devastating mistake for the U.S. to do this. And this is where I think a lot of the folks in the America First crowd are very, very upset with Trump because they believe that this will cost him his presidency. This will destroy his presidency, just like the Iraq invasion destroyed George W. Bush's presidency, and it will jeopardize his domestic agenda, which for them is much more important.
Yeah. I mean, we still have midterms. And I think they would get clobbered in midterms if they went forward with this war because a lot of their voters will just stay home. That's what they'll do.
Yeah.
They're not going to switch sides, but they're just not going to come out to vote, and Democrats are going to come out in droves. So,
And if you take a look at the difference between 2003 and now, I mean, I remember 2003, all of these Republican pundits and Democratic ones, incidentally, were all out there cheering rah rah for the war.
yeah,
And it took about a year and a half, 2 years before some courageous Republican voices in Congress started to express hesitation and then later on opposition to it. Walter Jones was one of the first ones, and he was a cheerleader for the war initially. Now, you have some of the heaviest, most important voices in America First movement opposing this from the outset, opposing it even before it has happened. So I think the political cost for Trump going down this path is going to be far greater, at least in the sense that it will be shown far sooner than it was for Bush.
well,
Bush
it's
got to be
been
elected.
yeah, and Trump can't get reelected, but certainly midterms could certainly hinder his agenda if Democrats are filling all the other chambers. But now here we are, we're 20 years after all of that. So we have adults who have never seen anything but endless war in the Middle East, and they want that to be over. And Trump said he would make that end, and now we're marching into another war. So it sounds to me like you're saying, so Iran, this would be devastating for Iran. If the U.S. does have control over the airspace, I mean, obviously air superiority, we see what Israel's done to Gaza. Iran could look at that and think the U.S. and Israel are going to do that to us. They're going to try to turn us into a hellscape. That is obviously devastating for Iran. So then people would say, well, then obviously the thing to do is give up, surrender, right? If this is going to be devastating for you and you're not going to really win, maybe the United States won't win either, but at least and certainly you make a great point of them targeting the American bases. And by the way, those bases do not have iron domes, right? So this would be a huge issue for American troops and American lives. But it still wouldn't be them bombing the United States. We're not going to see leveled out Los Angeles or leveled out Washington, D.C. So Iran's going to take the brunt of this. Why wouldn't they just then surrender? What is the issue there for Iran? Why is that an impossible ask?
So imagine that you are in some sort of a shootout and you're surrendered and you're in this building, a hut, whatever. And those who are surrounding you say, come out, we won't shoot. Raise your hand, drop your gun, come out, we won't shoot. You would only do that if you believe that there's some credibility in the promise that you won't shoot. The manner in which Trump has conducted himself in the last 7 to 10 days, I think, has destroyed confidence on the Iranian side that he can be trusted, even when it comes to an offer of capitulation. And that's presuming that capitulation is even in the cards in the sense that the Iranians are that weak and things of that nature. Let me set that aside for a moment. Assume that they are. They have lost confidence in Trump in that regard. Secondly, they've also lost confidence that Trump has the ability or willingness to say no to Israel. We've seen that because at the end of the day, we weren't supposed to be in this situation at all. There were supposed to be nuclear talks on Sunday, and he didn't stop them, and later on took credit for it. The Israelis will not be content with just having the nuclear program eliminated, and we just talked about that.
Right.
So surrender is not a stable outcome, and it's actually not an outcome at all. It's an illusion from their perspective. And I think that leaves them with the option of thinking that the only way they can deter or shorten the war is to fight back as hard as possible, make it as costly as possible for the United States to do this, and eventually wear Trump down because of domestic opposition, because of cost to the troops, etc. We saw that the Yemenis managed to do so. After 45 days, Trump declared victory, even though he achieved nothing. Mm-hmm. He got tired of it, and he cut the war short. I think that is what they're looking at. Again, it's a terrible scenario. The Iranians are going to pay a heavy price. The region will pay a heavy price, and the U.S. is going to have to pay a heavy price. The only winner, potentially, in that scenario is the Israelis.
Of course. What are the possibilities that other countries get involved on behalf of Iran? The United States, obviously the Israelis have a huge benefit in this, but there is the Strait of Hormuz and Iran potentially controlling that or cutting that off, causing massive economic devastation. There's also Iran's oil reserve, their oil capacity, which I would think China would like to have access to, continue to have access to, and same with Russia. And if the United States were to win and effect regime change and put in their own people, that essentially could get cut off the same way Russia's been shoved out of Syria. So is there a possibility that these other countries, I mean, how important is Iran to Russia, to China, to their outlook of how they're wanting to grow economically globally?
Geopolitically, Iran is very important, but I cannot see a scenario in which either of them would actually step in militarily to help Iran. Could they send material, weapons, ammunition, things of that nature to Iran? Perhaps. Could they do so in the numbers needed? I'm not so sure. It seems more likely that the Germans will actively enter this war than that anyone else would enter the war on the side of Iran. Because looking at some of the statements coming out of the Europeans at this point, I mean, I've never seen Europeans as warmongering as they are now. But the German chancellor said that Israel essentially is doing the dirty work for Europe. That is not just an expression of limited support. That is a full-on endorsement of an illegal war that Israel started, contradicting international law, war crimes in terms of bombing nuclear sites, all of this with a full endorsement from the Germans. Perhaps we shouldn't be so surprised, mindful of how supportive they have been of genocide in Gaza.
Yeah. Well, and how supportive they've been of Ukraine against Russia. I mean, they've been extremely warmongery. And Russia pummeling Kiev last night, that sent a message, didn't it? That the United States is real. This feels like World War at this point. It feels like it's the U.S. against everyone. And that here we are. I mean, I just don't even know where to go with this. This seems like an opportunity for Russia.
This was, again, very much part of why a big portion of Trump's base voted for him.
Yeah.
To not do this.
Right. Now, if you were China, I know that but if you were China at this point, I mean, I look at it and I think, wow, I mean, this would be an opportune time to take Taiwan. I mean, here's the United States engaged in all these wars. This would be an opportune time to do what it is I want to do if I'm going to do it, because they're quite busy and going to be quite busy. Just something to think about. I
don't find it likely that they will do that. But I think you're right in the sense that the Chinese did take a lot of advantage of the U.S. shooting itself in the foot with the invasion of Iraq and prolonging the Afghanistan war for 20 years. So there is that element. Would there be an interest in the part of some countries to that nature to the Iranians in order to prolong the fight, lead the U.S.? I mean, we've done that in plenty of places just very recently.
Yeah.
So you could see that, but again, I don't think they would do anything that could put them in a position of a direct confrontation with the U.S.
All right. Well, lay it out for us. How do you see this? How do you see this going? I mean, it looks like the U.S. is going to go to war. It looks like. I mean, how do you see this going realistically versus what we want?
I mean, the best case scenario is that Trump changes his mind just as he did in 2019 when he. Last minute, after he had ordered attacks on Iran, decided that, this is not worth it and pulled them back. And did not apologize for it, was actually bragging about it. So he still have that capacity, that nimbleness, and it could still happen. We just don't know. That would be probably the best case scenario, and everyone pulls back and try to actually be more reasonable about these things. The Israelis would be the biggest losers in this because they want war and they want to destabilize much of the Middle East. I mean, they're destabilizing Syria actively right now. The other scenario is that perhaps there's some form of an understanding that the U.S. just attacks Fordo and nothing else, and perhaps the Iranians will retaliate against Israel, but attack Dimona, but not attack the U.S. directly. Again, I'm not so sure whether that would work out because the Israelis would not accept it, and the Iran-Israel war would nevertheless continue. And the other one that I fear, unfortunately, is the most likely at this point, which is that within the next 24 to 48 or 72 hours, the United States will actively enter this war.
And then the outcome?
I think the outcome of that will be depending on exactly how the Iranians respond. If they conclude that there is no reason to hold back and they're going to go all out, then you're going to see attacks against all of the U.S. bases throughout the region, an activation probably of the various militias in Iraq, the Houthis. You will probably see some efforts to close down the Strait of Hormuz, and I'm not so sure that much needs to be done. A lot of traffic will reduce automatically because of the warfare that will be going on.
Yeah.
And then the question is, of course, what the results will be initially, and then if this is going to be a decisive victory in the short term, or if it's going to be something that drags out.
Oh, it doesn't look so good. Outlook not so good. But there is still a chance. There is still a chance. Trump is very mercurial. He changes his mind a lot. There is a chance that he's just saying stuff and posturing in order to get something. There's a possibility there. And then he backs out last minute because he realizes this is not what he wants. It's not what his base wants. But it does feel like we're marching straight into war, and one that would be very messy and very ugly. Trita, thank you for being here and breaking it down for us and giving us a bit more insight into this. Really appreciate your time. And really just appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.